Namaste everybody. It's my pleasure to be here today to make a presentation that involves some introductions and a lot of singing on Padams and Javalis. Arkay uncle and I have been trying to work out the dates for this for a while now, and I'm happy that it's finally happening today. I'll keep the intros as brief as possible while also trying to cover some important facts. The word Padam itself is one of the first coined words to refer to a composition. It's found in the Natya Shastra as far back as the 2nd century AD. And in contrast, it could be argued that the Javalis were probably the youngest term to be coined for a particular type of composition. The word Padam has morphed in its meaning over time. Initially, the Natya Shastra itself says that any meaningful composition that is evocative of Swara and Tala can be referred to as a Padam. And he also qualifies it further to say that it can contain Talam or it need not be contained within a Talam. So the Nibaddha and Anibaddha type of compositions are referred to by him. Over centuries, of course, we have quite some gaps in knowing what happened between that time and the next treatises. But as far as compositions go, we now come to the Ashtapadis, which are much later, at least 1,000 years later. And here, the word Pada itself just means a stanza. So 8 stanza compositions are called Ashtapadis. And it's pretty well known that Jayadeva's compositions do contain a lot of Shringara, and it's been accepted in all parts of the country, and it's a major part of Indian culture itself. And there is no taboo on where these should be performed, because in Orissa these are performed in the temples itself, and it's said that Jayadeva composed them in the temples for the traditional dancers to dance there. And then we come to Annamaya, who was called Padakavita Pitamaha. He was given the title of Padakavita Pitamaha, and even though he himself has composed or written a big treatise called Sankirtana Lakshanam, he refers to Padams there. And he says a Padam is a composition with a distinct Pallavi and generally 3 charanams. And now we are calling these kinds of compositions as Kirtanam or Sankirtanam, but he refers to them as Padams, this type of composition with this structure. And as we come down in time, another 200 years later, we have Kshetraya, in whose hands the Padams acquire a little different definition, I would say. And here Kshetraya, there are very varying accounts of Kshetraya. I'll read out a couple of passages for you to make your own inferences. And both were written at slightly different time periods, but not more than 2 decades apart, 20 years apart. But apart from that, we also have the Dasara Padas, which are rooted in the devotional tradition. They are from the Bhakti traditions of Karnataka. And then Muthu Tandava's compositions in Tamil Nadu also are called Padams. We then come to Sumbarama Dikshitar's definition. Here he gives a very different flavor to what the word Pada means. And he says they mean an erotic composition that usually has a Pallavi and 3 charanams and optionally an Anupallavi. This is Subbarama Dikshitar's definition of a Padam, and he is very clear about the lyrical content of the Padam, which he calls erotic in nature. And I think today we are kind of aligning with this definition of what a Padam means. So, even though we say Annamaya Kirtanams or Dasara Padas, we are not thinking of them as these kinds of compositions. And clearly we can see that the definition of the word has morphed and the connotations have also changed. Now, prominent composers of Padams are Kshetriya, and a little later after him, Sarangapani, and then we have Ghanam Seenayar, Ghanam Krishnayar, and then in Tamil Padams we have Ghanam Krishnayar, and then we have Subbaramayar, very popular Padams. Now, I want to now go back a little bit to Kshetriya, who is considered the king of Padam compositions, and I want to read out a couple of paragraphs from each of these books, and you can see how they talk about him. This one is by an article by Manchala Jagannatha Rao, who is considered one of the foremost authorities on the works of Kshetriya himself. And he says Kshetriya's period can be fixed around 1605 or 1610 to 1680. And this they infer based on the fact that Kshetriya travelled a lot, visited many courts, and he's performed astounding feats by composing in very short periods of time, 1200 compositions in 40 days, and amazing things like that. But more than anything, what I want to circle to is, he says Kshetrajna belonged to the tradition of Madhura Bhakti. As the legend says, while he was accomplished in literature, music and dance, he was attracted by a Devadasi of Gopala Deva temple in Muvapuri. As she happened to be a genuine devotee of the Lord, the Devadasi set a test to Kshetrajna to compose Padams in praise of Lord Muva Gopala and please the Lord if he were to possess her. Considering it to be an easy task, he set his mind at composing, but since he was adept in writing only amorous compositions till then, he struggled day and night for 3 days, concentrating mind and soul on the Lord, and at last burst forth, Shripati Sutu Bariki Ni Nopaleka in Ananda Bhairavi. Devadasi, who was watching him those 3 days, recognized the transformation that took place in him. She was moved with ecstasy and bowed before him in complete surrender. But as the intellectual and spiritual reformation that dawned on him was the result of the challenge posed by her, Kshetrajna addresses her venerably as sister and entreated her to convince her Lord to bless him. Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha include the emotion Shringara also, and Kshetrajna vividly pictured this sentiment in word and music, as it was a practice in those times to write Kavya, Nataka and Alankaras, taking these sentiments as the main rasa. Okay, so this is one. So here, even though a lot of this happened, because of this challenge set by the Devadasi, Kshetrajna has actually travelled a lot to many different pilgrim spots and been to the kingdoms of many rulers, and it's often said that Kshetriya's Padams have Antar Bhakti and Bahir Shringaram. So even though they contain Shringara words, the Bhakti underlying, so where you take yourself, the composer, the male composer assumes the role of the Nayika and addresses the Lord. And it's also equated to our identification with the Paramatma and Jivatma, the Jivatma seeking the Paramatma. Now, a little later, we have another very beautiful book. It's a translation of some Padams by Sri A.K. Ramanujam and David Shulman and Velcheru Narayan Rao. So here he says, the poet sometimes mentions other deities or human patrons other than Muvagopala, and he gives a range of deities that he has mentioned. The range of deities is sometimes used to explain Kshetrajna's name itself as one who knows sacred places. And he becomes yet another peripatetic bhakti poet saint, singing his way from temple to temple. But this explanation smacks of popular etymology and certainly distorts the poet's image. Despite the modern stories and improvised legends about him current today in South India, Kshetriya belongs less to the temple than to the courtesans' quarters of the Nayaka royal towns. We see him as a poet composing for and with the assumed persona of the sophisticated and cultured courtesans who perform before gods and kings. So, this is a slightly varying interpretation of what Kshetriya could be and what inspired him as a composer. And most importantly, what is the takeaway is, of course, there's no way to corroborate this either way at this point in time. But where did the Padams belong? And uniformly, all accounts of Padams and Javalis mention the Dhanamal family as one of the biggest repositories who continued that tradition of composition. And even Subbarama Dikshitar, in his description of Padams, talks about how it is sung in Vilambakala. There are some who say that in the Andhra traditions, Padams are sung much faster. So we have heard snippets in some movies and some other artists who have presented them. But unfortunately, we don't have many Carnatic musicians from the Andhra traditions performing these on stage. So the Dhanamal tradition is the one that is come to stay. And even in that, it is said that between Dhanamal's playing on the veena, because it was a plucked instrument and it couldn't sustain notes, there was a little acceleration when you compare it to Brindama's rendition of the same in the voice. And I have asked Brindama about this, and she said you cannot compare what the voice can do with that of an instrument, and the instrument obviously has its limitations, but Dhanamal did not have any limitations as a musician, and she has a very pivotal place in history, and it's totally wrong to place her in a very different context and misread her contributions. So this was Brindama's own humility and exceptional bhakti for her own grandmother, who definitely has a big role in Carnatic history. So we'll start today. I will move to Javalis when we come there. But if you do have any questions, I will try to answer them. Otherwise, we will move on to singing. He's from Andhra. Yeah. The town called Muva, that's where he's from. And in fact, among the things I read about him, says that Annamaya's poetry was very, very pure. And compared to that, Kshetraya's itself is slightly less. And they say that Sarangapani, who is actually right after Kshetraya, probably born the year Kshetrajna died, is a little more crass compared to Kshetraya. But Many Telugu scholars have said that Kshatriya was the one who could express the finest of all human emotions, and nobody expressed it like him. All the emotions associated with Shringara in such great detail, and it said that the whole study of Nayakas and Nayikas that is prolifically used, especially to understand dance and the context. If you just simply study Kshatriya Padams, apparently that itself gives you many varieties of Nayakas and Nayikas. And he says that there was a balance between how he portrayed Nayakas and Nayikas. Like, he didn't play up the Nayikas or the Nayakas. There were very refined women and there were very refined men too. And similarly, there were very crass women. Sometimes the men get stuck with such women and vice versa. So there is no need to push up patriarchy or feminism in today's terms, like we are constantly battling with these terms. It is said that the composer of his order portrays a big range of all kinds of human beings and the emotions they go through. So Kshatriya is that's why placed as among the best of Padam composers. So today it's very extra special for me to perform this concert with Ganesh accompanying me on the Chitravina. He will also occasionally sing. We have attended so many classes with Brindama together for many years, and our classes were typically from 6:30 to 9 p.m. every day. There was no break, and we have had so many years of pleasure. And even though we were geographically apart for many years, and we didn't, our Shrutis didn't match at one point of time, and we didn't sing together for a long time. Even today, when we sit down to sing those songs, Brindama's stamp is still there. Like, she probably stamped in our brains. That was the power of her Siddhi with this. Siddhi is a lot of mental dwelling on something, meditation on something. And clearly it was her Siddhi that left such a lasting imprint on our minds. And before we even went to Brindama, I must mention that my father himself had a sizable repertoire of Padams and Javalis, some acquired from his own father, who was also a very well-known exponent of some Padams like Velavare. There are LP recordings of them. And Appa, as children, he had taught us a few Padams and Javalis before Brindama became a big part of our lives. So, and I have Akshara with me, who's embarked on this journey. So even though a lot of people would frown upon the fact that, young kids learn these things. I have actually, when I was a youngster, before I got married, I've had several people come and tell me, it's all well and good that you learned from Brindama, but you should watch out what you're singing on stage. You can't be singing all these words on stage. But let me tell you something. I didn't know enough Telugu to know what these words meant. More than anything, what attracted me was the beauty of the melody. It was the musicality, the nuances. It was such a huge climb in terms of our musical development. And even today, I've learned quite a few songs from Brindama's repertoire, and of course a lot more from my father's repertoire. But there are padams which you will sing simply for one phrase in them, one sangati, one line. That is the beauty of those padams. They are so unique. And this is why a lot of musicians who fell for that style of singing also never found music elsewhere that was equally fulfilling for them. So it's simply for one phrase we would end up singing a full song. And many times Padams do have repetitive tunes and repetitive parts, So then why would you keep singing those? In Tyagaraja Kritis, for example, if we have multiple charanams, the habit is to drop them and sing only first charanam, last charanam. Or, in some cases, Tyagaraja himself decided, okay, if I keep doing this, they're going to drop these charanams. So he tuned them all in different ways. And I know that Shamangudi Mama tuned Bhavayami Raghuramam. It was originally fully in Saveri, but he made it a Ragamalika so that we won't drop. So, knowing that we will drop, imagine singing one song just for one phrase or one line. That is the beauty of the Padams. And we have the pleasure of having Sri Mannarkoil Balaji on the Mridangam. So to come back to the point about the Sahityam contained in the Padams, I would actually not give you any meanings right now. I would let you all find out for yourselves and interpret it for yourselves. And I would say the same thing to Akshara and any other musical students. The journey is first musical and you can learn the lyrics later. And if we were to say these things about Padams and Javalis, it can be extended to film songs, a lot of Western songs. They all have pretty, what we might call crass lyrics. And this is also a study of Indian culture itself. An Ashtapadi that is accepted everywhere and there's no taboo. And a Padams which also came from arguably similar settings. And today we are looking at it a different way. So is it our own conservativeness that's coming into play, or should we focus on right now for her it is a musical climb, and then eventually she can learn the meanings too. So it is for the gurus to decide appropriately what they would feel is right for their children, and similarly with parents. So on that note, we would start with the first Padam we have taken up today. This is a composition of Sri Sarangapani in Ragam Anand Bhairavi, Pattakura. So this Sangati itself would be the reason why we would sing this Padam. It's so unique and it's not found in any other composition. We were even discussing this a few days ago. And there are so many beautiful masterpieces, but among them, these still stand out for their musicality. One other important point, when I was preparing for this, concert and deciding what I must say about the Padams and Javalis, obviously my mind goes to Brindama and I'm thinking, how would she respond to this? Dhanamal is famously supposed to have said, Patapati Pesarava, referring to Academy's morning sessions. So for them, nothing equal music. A picture is worth more than 1,000 words, and nothing is more important than the sound of the music itself. But still, Brindama in a few contexts has talked about when a padam should be sung. And she comes from a big heritage herself, and the concert format as we all know it today was kind of designed by Ariyakudi, under his guru's guidance, is it's said. So Poochi Engar and Ariyakudi are supposed to have been the architects of this modern kacheri, the way we format or present the modern kacheri. I have given extensive talks on this subject, so I won't dwell much into it. But Vrindama comes from a very different tradition, in a family of Devadasis who performed in temples for certain rituals. And they also performed in private gatherings. And this is how Devadasis all over India were employed. Their artistic excellence and everything was groomed in these channels, in these means. And they did not, like there are very, even I think when Vrindama herself was singing, her times when she started learning, they were not allowed to put talam on their thighs because it meant a very different connotation in their society. Inviting somebody to your lap kind of a thing. So it was frowned upon, and they all had to fight these battles and slowly come out of those times. And of course everybody has to live with their times, and the next generation works on coming out of their times. So we lose some and we win some. So it's always going to be that way. But that apart, coming from these settings, and not a lot of women musicians did not engage in singing Kalpana Swarams, Neravals, Ragam Tanam Pallavis, which are all considered a male domain. So male musicians seem to have predominantly chosen to showcase the creative side of music, and women have showcased compositions. And coming from that setting and coming to a modern kacheri setting of singing in sabhas and everything, artists like Vrindama, whose repertoire in this was clearly extensive, did not still sing only these in the concerts. They still brought to fore the great works of the Trinity, Tyagaraja, Dikshitar and Shama Shastri, and other composers like Gopalakrishna Bharati, Patnam Subramanya Iyer, many composers. And even though they got labeled or branded as Padam Javali singers, Brinda Mukta, they judiciously presented some in their kacheris, and they didn't sing them anywhere in the kacheri. Simply, everybody who does something well wants to do that a lot and showcase that as their USP. But Vrindama still never crossed certain things that she found out for herself, probably through her own practice and usage of voice. And she's talked about how a padam should be sung after a main piece only because the voice needs to mellow down. You have done a lot of other singing, and you're singing Kalpana Swarams, Neraval, Ragam. Each one requires a different usage and technique of the voice. And by the time you come to the padams, your voice is absolutely mellow, your mind is very mellow, and you can truly practice this thing of Jivatma seeking the Paramatma. So she has talked about this in class too. And in the few occasions that she was asked to just sing a Padam Javali concert, she's always started off with a Kriti and then moved on to the Padams and Javalis. You can refer to some of her recordings and you'll know that I'm telling you how she did it. We now move on to a Javali. So I'm going to keep alternating between a Padam and a Javali in the selections as well. So we come to a Javali of Sri Pattabhiramaya. the Javali that we are going to first present is in Ragam Saveri, set to Aditalam, composition of Sri Pattabhiramaya. And in this Javali, our understanding of Saveri today is as a Janyam of Maya Malavagaula. However, in the Brindama Bani, they would occasionally bring a Kaishika Nishadam usage. And a long time ago, when my brother was learning from Brindama herself, and she taught him Sri Rajagopala, Dikshitar's masterpiece. And they sing it with a very distinct Kaishika Nishadam. And being the really obedient and very respectful student that Ravi was, when he heard the phrase first, he just simply looked up at her. That's all. He didn't ask or say anything. And the class happened. And the next day when we went back to class, she said, go to the table and fetch that book. And she had marked a page. And she said, open that page and read out what it says. And here it's Subbarama Dikshitar's Sampradaya Pradarshini, where he talks about the usage of Kaishika Nishadam in Saveri. So there is a good backing for a lot of these things. And there's of course no stopping the evolution of any ragam. But keeping that in mind, we should also sometimes remember to not give up phrases, because the core will become less and less. We'll lose core usages. Even if it's a Vishesha Prayoga and it's not a part of the big bulk of the ragam, it comes only once in a while, it's still important to carry that with us. Otherwise ragas will morph within 1 or 2 generations. They will morph into something that we can't recognize, and then we will have a problem with, what did history say? They didn't document anything properly. It is our failing if we don't pay attention and learn them properly, and we can't blame the people for documenting. And learning in the right way, this is again whether Padams and Javalis can be learnt through recordings. It's available plenty now. You don't need Brindama today to sit and teach you, but still we learnt a lot from Brindama, but we also learnt a lot by picking up from her recordings. We heard it so much that the cassettes would literally just go, and before they died we would make a copy into another cassette. So, but even though the songs were etched in our minds, we would sing it in front of Brindama, who would of course be waiting to pounce on us for any mistake, slightest mistake we might commit, and she'll just have this stern face, and we'd be waiting for the slight change in her eyebrows. And if we didn't give any room for corrections, it would be a great day, because she totally disapproved of learning through recordings. And she also was self-critical about the fact that she published a book on Javalis with notations in them. She said, I did the worst possible thing, because now everybody is learning something and singing something, and I made it possible through this book. So, and I'll tell you, even that has a very good basis. If you heard, so everybody's idea of ragam is shaped by what they've heard, what they've learnt, and all that. And suppose you've heard or come into learnt your music without being exposed to artists like them. It's not your fault. But you will interpret the notations based on your understanding of the ragam. Now this Saveri, you might miss out the Kaishika Nishadam if it's not written in the notation. But for an artist like Brindama, it's in their minds already they know that Saveri will have this phrase usage in there, and how to sing the Ga in a Kalyani, or how to sing the Ma in a Sahana. They know the ragam as entities, not as swarams. And you're trying to read this off of a book as a swaram, you're going to lose a lot of data, which we call anuswarams, in the process. So we would actually, even if we ended up learning something by sheer listening, we would actually go to her class and get it corrected, or at least get it stamped with her approval. So it mattered, because these kinds of data will get lost if you don't have access to recordings, which was even rare in our time. Today it's a different matter. But that transmission through the correct way is really crucial to preserve the best of everything.
ಮುಟ್ಟವದುರ ಮೋಗನಾಗ ನನ್ನಿ ಬುಡು ಮುಟ್ಟವದುರ ನನ್ನಿ ಬುಡು ಮುಟ್ಟವ ಮೋಗನಾಗ ನನ್ನಿ ಬುಡು ಮುಟ್ಟವದುರ ಮೋಗನಾಗ ನನ್ನಿ ಬುಡು ಮುಟ್ಟವದುರ ಮೋಗನಾಗ ನನ್ನಿ ಬುಡು
next will be another Sarangapani Padam in Ragam Yadukula Kambodi. This also, apart from invoking memories of Sri Shamangudi Srinivasayar, whose version we heard first and then learnt from Brindama, and even though it was almost similar, Brindama's version would have much more nuances. And I recently came across a rendition of this by the Bombay sisters, and I just remembered Srimati Lalita, who passed away a few days ago. This is also equally in memory of her. It looked like they have learnt it from their Guru Sri T.K. Govindarao, who also learnt from Brindama, and their version was pretty close to what Brindama herself would sing. So I'll present that now. now come to a super popular composition of Sri Pattabhiramaya, the Javali Nee Maatale Mayanura in Ragam Purvi Kalyani. This is also extensively used in the dance, and I've watched a very exquisite portrayal of this by Srimati Priyadarshini Govind, who brings out the sassiness of the heroine in this song. Nee maatale mayanura, nee maatale mayanura, nee maatale mayanura, sabe malgara. 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 Nee maatale mayanura. another padam. This is the exquisite padam in ragam Begada Yala Padare, composition of Sri Kshetrajna. So a lot of Kshetriya's padams are set to Tishra Jati Triputatalam with very unique edipus. They don't start at samam. Many of them start like that. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that.
So this is one of those things, and of course, needless to say, every padam presented by Brindama in any number of recordings across the decades of her life, you won't find one little glitch, imperfection. I don't know how she did it, but yeah, this is one of her most exquisite renditions. The edipu of this one is Atitam.
Yeah.
Okay, second half of the Talam, just before you come to the main beat.
Yala Padare
The next would be the Javali. Are you able to hear my voice? Smarasundharanguni. So Dharmapuri Subbarayar, one of the most prolific Javali composers. In fact, he was only a composer of Javalis, unlike some other composers. He and Pattabhiramaya are the two only Javali composers. Among others like Pattam Subramaniayar, Tanjavur Chinnaya, Swati Tirunal, and they had other types of compositions to their credit, but these people only focused on Javalis. And it's quite well known that Dharmapuri Subbarayar had a good friendship with Veena Dhanamal, and he was such a huge admirer of her music that this Javali was composed in praise of her. Here I want to mention that Javalis, even though are clubbed with Padams, just for the lyrics, it's similar, but Javalis, according to all scholars, contain very colloquial usage of the language. Many Javali composers were in Tamil Nadu and they composed in Telugu. And I think there's also some Kannada Javalis, but I'm not aware of them. And there's a lot of debate as to where the word even comes from. Padam, at least, you find extensive references to the word Padam in literature itself. But for Javali, there is no such definitive source where you can say that this is where the word originates from. But its origin is very recent as well. Only from the 19th century we have Javalis. And there seems to be some special connect between two of the only Javali composers, Dharmapuri Subbarayar and Pattabhiramaya. They were both employed as clerks, clerical jobs and Javalis. I don't know what the connection is, but they seem to embody that. They also got patronage from some kingdoms, and Dharmapuri Subbarayar was patronized by Sri Chamarajendra Odayar, and he's composed some javalis in his praise as well. But according to many of the sources that I read from, javalis in fact are not aspiring to be Antarbhakti Bahir Shingaram. Any such lofty goals are not set for javalis. They are purely on other human beings, and they portray those emotions, and this is why probably they are also considered more lighter variety, more crass variety, and they do portray sarcasm, all emotions associated with Shringara, anger, sarcasm, disappointment, and then actually asking your lover about all his excesses. And the Dhanamal family, Dharmapuri Subbarayar also composed a javali on Dhanamal's daughters, the elder two daughters. That's another interesting thing. And there are many, mostly javalis are supposed to be in the lighter ragas as well. And that way it's easy to place them in a concert. So you'll find Behag, Kamaj, some special usages of these ragams, where, in Tyagaraja Kritis, you'll find a Kamaj that is more pure, and in javalis you can actually take some licenses. And in Smarasundharangani particularly, this is actually a famous deviation from the ragam, where Dharmapuri Subbarayar, after composing, in fact he would compose and simply hand it over to Dhanamal to beautify it and refine it. And when he composed and gave this javali to her, she added a touch of Pratimadhyamam to it, and that came to stay. And the Dhanama family will never deviate from it, even though artists like Shamangudi, who adhere to the Lakshana of a raga, would correct that and sing it purely to the raga. But it is, what you call artistic license, like poetic license. Some such usages are found in javalis. Ganesh's favorite javali, and he wants to sing it. So we also assume that javalis are faster, but there are exceptions. Now, for example, Smarasundharanguni is sung at a kind of medium slow pace by Brindama, and there are other slow javalis like Sakhi Prana and Idi Niku Maryadaga, that is in Begada. So you'll see such deviations as well. But I think there is some room for artists to choose the pace at which they sing. But Brindama chose this because it brings out that lilt so beautifully.
Smarasundharanguni sariyovare, Smarasundharanguni sariyovare, Smarasundharanguni sariyovare, Smarasundharanguni sariyovare, Sarva Kotilona Vadiyogami సుందర గుని సరియువరే సర్వ కోటిలోన వజీరోగమేర స్మర సుందర గుని సరియువరే అడ్డము పాలు కడి ఆడిన మాటలు 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 అడ్డము పాలు కడే ఆడిన మాటలు అడ్డము పాలు కడే ఆడిన మాటలు అడ్డము పాలు కడి ఈ చెడియనను కనుల జోడనే స్మరసు గుని చెడియను కనుల జోడనే స్మర సుందర గుని సరియువరే సర్వ కోటిలో నవజీ రోగమేర స్మర సుందర గుని సరియువరే வினுலக்கு புக வினவையில் வினுலக்கு புக வினவையில் வினுலக்கு புக வினவையில் வினுலக்கு புக வினவையில் வேணுலக்கு போக வினவையில் வேணுலக்கு போக வினவையில் வேணுலக்கு போக வினவையில் வேணினே பாட சபாஷே ஸ்மர சுந்தர குனி சரியுவரே பாட சபாஷே ஸ்மர சுந்தர குனி சரியுவரே சரக கோட்டிலோ நவஜி ரோகமேர ஸ்மர சுந்தர குனி சரியுவரே
funny Tamil padam. This is in a category of compositions called Ninda Stuti, where you express your love for the Lord by scolding Him. Your infatuation, the liberty you share with the Lord, you can scold the Lord. So here, the composer, Sri Ghanam Krishnayar, he is asking Parvati, Ettai kandi ichchai kondai mahale. What did you see in this Shiva that you fell for him? And he opens Bala Saraswati, Brindama's cousin and the famous dancer, is supposed to have started one of the performances with the Anupallavi, which straight away goes on to say, Suddha Paityakaran Gangadharan. So he asks one by one, he asks, what did you fall for? Did you fall for his matted locks? Did you fall for him because he has the Ganga in his head? Did you fall for his, ash smeared body? One by one he asks Parvati. So it's humorous Ninda Stuti, set beautifully in Ragam Kalyani, Rupakatalam. And when the Rupakatalam is sung slow, usually we adopt Tishra Eka because it's easy to show the breakdown of the talam. Since we are also, it's actually quite common to start padams because of the length. Often it started at the Anupallavi. Even though it's not the particular practice of this particular padam, I will still start it with the Anupallavi, like my predecessor Srimati Bala Saraswati.
Sudha Paitiyakaran Gangadaran Tohayamodavan Peyodanadiya Sudha Paitiyakaran செய்கின்ற வரிசையை பெருமை சோமனை சேரத்தில் தரித்து ஒரு கண் தோலங்கும் நேற்றே
Now present a beautiful Javali in Ragam Kamach. I think the maximum number of Javalis are in Kamach and Behag. Probably Kamach a little more than Behag. It's a beautiful Rupakatalam Javali of Sri Patnam Subramanya Iyer.
అప్పుడు మనసు నిలుచునటే అతివరో పదమోగల చక్కని పురుషుడు యువతుల చొక్కపు పదమోగల చక్కని పురుషుడు యువతుల పక్క చేరి సరసముగా పక్క చేరి సరసముగా పక్క చేరి సరసముగా పల్కుచు కను సైక జయక పక్క చేరి సరసముగా పల్కుచు కను సైక జయక పుటు మనసు నిలుచుననే అతివరు వరద వెంకటేశ్వరుడిటు సురతకేడి సల్ప కోరిన వరద వెంకటేశ్వరుడిటు సురతకేడి సల్ప కోరిన తరుణములో మారుడు ఇది సరముల వీర వీర గురియక తరుణములో మారుడు ఇది సరముల వీర వీర గురియక పుటు మనసు నిలుచుననే హరివరో ఇదేటి మాట అప్పుడు
Just like there are slower javalis, there are some medium-paced padams, especially in Tamil. One of the most famous examples is Velavare, very popular as well, set to Ragam Bhairavi. There's a profusion of padams in Bhairavi itself, and we were hard-pressed to choose, but I thought this might be a great example for a medium-paced padam. There's a composition of Ghanam Seenaya.
வேலவரே உமை தேடி ஒரு மடலை
சாமி
வேலவரே உமை தேடி ஒரு மடலை
சாமி
வேலவரே உமை தேடி ஒரு மடலை
சாமி
வேலவரே உமை தேடி ஒரு மடலை விடிய முழுதும் வேலவரே உமை தேடி ஒரு மடலை விடிய முழுதும் வேலவரே உமை தேடி ஒரு மடலை விடிய முழுதும் காத்திருக்கிறவகையன வேலவரே உமையை தேடி சாமி வேலவரே உமை தேடி சாமி வேலவரே உமை தேடி ஒரு மடலை விடிய முழுதும் காத்திருக்கிறவகையன வேலவரே உமை வாலிபமும் சேர்வேழு போருவோம் அடிவனோயிடையும் மறைவதனமும் வாலிபமும் சேர்வேழு போருவோம் வடிவனோயிடையும் மறைவதனமும் வாலிபமும் சேர்வேழு போருவோம் இடையும் அறிவதனமும் மேலும் அவள் மேனி பசு புனிதமும் மின்னல் கொடியும் அன்னநடையும் மேலும் அவள் மேனி பசு புனிதமும் மின்னல் கொடியும் அன்னநடையும் உமை தேடி ஒரு மடந்தை விடிய முழுதும் கதிர கரவகையன வேலவரி உமையை விதவிதமான நங்கை மீது பணி தரேத்த பல வருஷம் விதவிதமான
நங்கை
பணி தரேத்த பல வருஷம் கதலை தோடையில் அதரக்கனி சோறு கழகும் கதலை தோடையில் அதரக்கனி சோறு கழகும்
கருத்தை ஓரக்கும்
கலகலனோடைய வந்து கதலை தோடையில் அதரக்கனி சோறு கழகும் கருத்தை
ஓரக்கும்
கலகலனோடைய வந்து வேலவர் உமை தேடி ஒரு மடந்தை விடிய முழுதும் கதிர கரவகையன வேலவரே உமையை வேலவரே உமை தேடி வேலவரே உமை தேடி ஒரு மடந்தை விடிய முழுதும் கதிர கரவகையன வேலவரே உமையை
Now present Samayamide in Behag, composition of Sri Patnam Subramaniar, set to Rupakatala.
Samyamideraranaasami Samyamideraranaasami Tamasal Chakura தமசுல் சகோர சமயமிதே தமசுல் சகோர கமலவைரி கமலவைரி ಚನ್ನುದೇಜಿನ ಕಮಲವೈರಿ ಚನ್ನುದೇಜಿನ ಕಾಕ್ಷಲಿಡರ ದೂರ ಕಮಲವೈರಿ ಚನ್ನುದೇಜಿನ ಕಾಕ್ಷಲಿಡರ ದೂರ ಕಮಲವೈರಿ ಚನ್ನುದೇಜಿನ ಕಾಕ್ಷಲಿಡರ ದೂರ மன்னன சேனியே உவச்சே 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 மன்னன சேனி ஓவச்சே நன்னு ಗೋಡಿಯೊಡೆನಗಟ್ಲು ನಿನ್ನ ರೇ ಕಲಗಟ್ಟಿ ನಿನ್ನ ರೇ ಕಲಗಟ್ಟಿ ನಿನ್ನ ರೇ ಕಲಗಟ್ಟಿ ನೀರಜಾಕ್ಷ ವೆಂಕಟೇಶ ನಿನ್ನ ರೇ ಕಲಗಟ್ಟಿ ನೀರಜಾಕ್ಷ ವೆಂಕಟೇಶ ನಿನ್ನ ರೇ ಕಲಗಟ್ಟಿ ನೀರಜಾಕ್ಷ ಸಮಯಮಿದೆ ತಮಸ ಸಮಯಮಿದೆ ಸಮಯಮಿದೆ ಸಮಯಮಿದೆ
எது எது சாரி அது பாடுங்க We now come to another Kshetriya Padam. This is in Ragam Ahiri, set to Mishra Chaputalam.
Mosa Maya
We'll sing a beautiful Javali in Ragam, Yamuna Kalyani, Adi Nipai. There's so many renditions of this Javali. Among my favorites is also Maharajapuram Vishwanath Ayer's rendition. And of course my grandfather's LP recording is also available of this, and it has a very different touch to that.
Adini pai marulu konnadi, 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 adini pai marulu konnadi. Ramaragho abhi ramara be ramaragho abhi ramara be ramaragho abhi ramara be ramaragho abhi ramara be ramanayo samamana kanu gaje ramanayo
We'll conclude with a beautiful padam, Tamil padam in Ragam Sahana, composition of Sri Subbaramayar. There are some unusual phrases in this also, in Brindama's rendition of it. The words should conclude this performance.
இனியன பேச்சிருக்க இனியன பேச்சிருக்க எல்லோருக்கும் நகை பாய்ச்சிரு இனியன பேச்சிருக்க எல்லோருக்கும் நகை பாய்ச்சிரு இனியன பேச்சிருக்க எல்லோருக்கும் நகை பாய்ச்சிரு இனியன பேச்சிருக்க எல்லோரும் நகை பாய்ச்சிரு இனியன பேச்சிருக்க தனிய வைத்திங்கே வரதீரந்தோ தனிய வைத்திங்கே வரதீரந்தோ தனிய வைத்திங்கே வரதீரந்தோ தனிய வைத்திங்கே வரதீரந்தோ தப்பிரம் போலது முத்தைய வேலரே தனிய வைத்திங்கே வரதீரந்தோ தப்பிரம் போலது முத்தைய வேலரே இனியன பேச்சிருக்க மனதிற்கு செய்தபடி மட்டமேறி போச்சே மனதிற்கு செய்தபடி மட்டமேறி போச்சே மனதிற்கு செய்தபடி மட்டமேறி போச்சே குசும குந்தள வள்ளி மணாளரே
குசும குந்தள
வள்ளி மணாளரே குசும குந்தள வள்ளி மணாளரே
குசும குந்தள
வள்ளி மணாளரே
சுபரமதமிழ்கி
செய்தலோலரே
குசும குந்தள
வள்ளி மணாளரே
சுபரமதமிழ்கி
செய்தலோலரே இனி என்ன பேச்சு
எல்லோரும் நகைப்பாச்சிடைக்கு நீ என்ன பேச்சு ஓம் ஓம்
There were many more things we wanted to present, but time just can't do justice to the vastness of this topic, the number of composers who have handled it, and the beauty of the renditions of so many great Vidwans and Vidushis before us. I hope you enjoyed this presentation and we did at least some little justice to the topic. I particularly wish to thank Sri Mannarkoil Balaji. It's absolutely not easy to play for Padams at this pace. You can't do solis, you just have to practically just keep thalam. And it's really incredibly tough to play. And very few artists, even with Brindama, it gelled with very few artists, Mridangists. Yeah. And
my guru, M.N. Kandaswamy Pillai, actually used to play a lot of concerts for Brindamukta. I have heard a lot of concerts along with them. In fact, there is a recording in Doordarshan where our guru has played.
Yeah.
Very difficult to play for Padams and Javalis, especially when you don't know the pauses, you don't know when it starts and when it ends. That is a
they don't
difficult
fall exactly to beat.
to
They're
the
not
structure
predictable.
that is created by
Yeah.
the Trinity or anybody, So it's very difficult to find when the padam is going to end. That's very difficult. Maybe at one place, if you had noticed, I had already ended and they started again. Very subtle, it's
That
very
doesn't
subtle.
matter, yeah.
Very subtle. It's very difficult. So that's why we have to keep on looking at them. Also keep on giving the.
Yeah.
I had a
Thank you so
great
much.
experience today, in
Yeah,
fact.
Thank you so much. And I thank Sri Arkay uncle for giving us this opportunity. Thank you, Ganesh. I am pretty sure the Chitravina accompaniment was itself one of the highlights of accompanying that. Even though it's a plugged instrument, the continuity of the sangatis can be maintained on the Chitravina very similar to a voice, because the range is vast in the Chitravina strings and you can bring the continuity. You don't have to change strings for every 4 notes. So it was a great pleasure also for us to practice together and relive all our memories from the past. And thank you, Akshara.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Akshara.
Akshara.
This is my daughter, Akshara. And she's made her beginning with this journey into Padams and Javalis. So, thank you all for coming, and those of you who are watching.